the longest stretch where it doesn't retrograde. And that's oftentimes why it's so very intense. But also, as we will see a little bit, when Mars or any retrograde planet hits certain points in its orbit, meaning it begins by moving forward and hitting the degree where it will eventually, let's say, go direct, and then it will move to a degree where it stations or stops still, which it's doing now. And then that degree is also going to then have a retrograde motion. And again, eventually, the Mars is going to cross that degree again. So the time between when Mars crosses the degree where it will eventually go direct and the time it crosses the degree where it goes retrograde is a long stretch. And because the degrees in between that bunch of planets, Mars will cross it 3 times. And that's why it's very, very important. Well, I'll go into that in a minute because some people might be a little confused about that. But it retrogrades for about 72 days every 2 years and 2 months. And on November 14th, again, I do this for GMT. So some people might say November 13th, but in GMT, it's November 14th, exactly. Mars will station direct at 21 Pisces, 11 minutes in Revati. So the thing here basically is that any time you have anything in your chart or anything in between 4 degrees and 21 Pisces, these are where Mars is going to hit 3 times. So it's really important if you're doing your chart, if you're looking at where Mars is taking place, Mars will take place within 2 houses, 2 bhavas. It'll take place where Pisces is and Aries is, Mina and Mesha. And then it will also take place between 21 and 4. Now, if you have something, Lagna or planets, in between this, it will hit it 3 times. As it goes direct, as it goes retrograde, and then as it goes direct again. If you have anything, within a degree of, let's say, 21 Pisces or 4 degrees of Aries, it's going to only hit it twice because it's going to be sitting on that degree. And that's going to be a very powerful transit because it's going to be at the point where it stands still, either retrograde or direct. So those are the things you have to look for in your chart to see how it affects you. But if you have nothing in between these degrees or even opposite, because the opposite degree is going to get, the aspect, it's still going to be in your houses. It's still going to be in your life. It's like when I teach eclipses or anything else, it's still going to be in your life. It's still going to be obviously in the sky. So it's very, very, very important, to be able to know what that house in the chart represents. And of course, you could do that from the Lagna, you could do it from the Chandra Lagna, and that will be really important. And then just going to say that these are the other important aspects of September, especially Jupiter, because Jupiter is actually stationing direct tomorrow. So after its 4 months of retrograde from May 14th, it's going direct. And, Jupiter that's another lecture, but Jupiter was interesting because it also went from Capricorn to Sagittarius. And that retrogrades retrogrades for about 120 days or 4 months, every 13 months. So every year it starts later. So if this year the retrograde started in May, mid-May, next year the retrograde will start in mid-June. And it will go from mid-June to mid-October. So it's kind of easy with Jupiter to know exactly each year when it's going to have its retrograde motion. And when Jupiter goes direct, at least the good news with Jupiter direct is that a lot of times projects that stall are going to move forward. And now, of course, in the age of the pandemic, it means things are opening up. Things are really starting to now open it up, even in New York City, where everything has been closed for so long. Actually, in 2 weeks, restaurants are opening. So that's what Jupiter is bringing in this particular day and age. I mean, in other years, it does other things, but in this day and age, it's very much related to the fact that things are opening up and maybe things that have stalled, you're pushing forward with it. And then Rahu Ketu enters Taurus, Scorpio, in September 20th for a year and a half. And then Saturn will station direct September 29th, after it was also retrograding for about 137 days from May 11th, every 12 and a half months. Anyway, so, and again, we can come back to this when we, when I break and we have a discussion, because again, I'm not gonna do my normal, 2 hours worth of talking. And just to be very quick, the phenomenon of retrogradation, for those of you who really don't know, it's really when a planet reduces the speed by which it travels, from the position of the Earth, and it stops at a particular degree, and it appears to move backwards for a fixed amount of time, and it lingers then longer than usual in a portion of the zodiac. And then as it moves backwards, it goes backwards, and still until it will station direct, and then it will move forward again. And the Sanskrit word for retrograde motion is called vakra, and vakra means curved or crooked. It means a crooked path. It means bent, twisted. So when that planet is retrograde, it really means it's going on a crooked course. Things are happening not the way we have planned. So even though one might say from the past, oh, Mars is going to do this or Jupiter is going to do this, trust me, we never know. And that's why we're always surprised. We're always surprised, for instance, now at the intensity of the fires. Well, there are fires in California every year. Why now? Why now? Astrologically, I mean, of course, climate-wise, you can scientifically say why, but astrologically, why now? And I think that what happens also during these retrograde times, especially around the degree and around the time it retrogrades, which is now, it retrograded on Wednesday, the 9th, but it was at that degree already for about a week. But I think during times of eclipses, during times of retrograde motion, things that happen in the sky or in the world seem to catch our attention. And that to me is always what happens. I mean, as I was talking about, I did a lecture on eclipses a couple of months ago, and that was fairly soon after George Floyd was killed. And there were, protests. And we have 3 eclipses. We had June 5th, we had June 21st, and July 5th. Normally we don't have 3. And I was saying to everybody, African Americans have been, in these kinds of situations before. They have been, murdered or shot by the police. Why now? This happens all the time. And a lot of that had to do, I think, yes, with the pandemic. People have been so frustrated, but also if you looked in the sky and you saw these eclipses, it made that event really kind of take notice. And I think that's what's happening with the Mars. And way, way, way before the pandemic, I had said last summer also that that's going to be why the election season is going to be especially, crazy and aggressive. So that's another thing that happens. So basically that's, how the retrogrades work, and the retrogrades work like that for every planet. So really, even though they're for different lengths of time, every time a planet is retrograde, it appears to slow up. So it occupies a portion of the sky, it transits for a longer interval. And the important thing also is approximately midway through the retrograde cycle, the planet is closest to the Earth in its orbit around the sun, because the retrograde is not only appearing to move slowly, but it's moving closest to the Earth in its orbit. And that's why midway through that cycle is going to be the most important timing. And for the planets that are beyond the on the outer orbit of the Earth, so Mercury and Venus, when they retrograde, they conjoin the sun, but Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn are always opposite the sun. So you will know midway in this cycle between now and November, that means in October, we are going to have the sun and Mars in that full aspect or opposition. So you always know that about halfway, that's what it's going to do. And because of that, retrogrades are considered to be strong and powerful. They're not necessarily considered to be auspicious. This is a mistake that some people make. Oh, retrogrades are strong, that means they're auspicious. It doesn't. It just means that they're strong. So if you have a malefic energy, let's say you have, some malefic force, let's say it was by your front door, You know, is that good or bad? I mean, it's like not good, you know, you want it to go away. Or let's say you're living in the wilderness and a black bear comes to your front door. That's what it means to have that retrograde. And because it's slow, it's there and you have to deal with it. Even Jupiter is a benefic, but when it's very, very, very close, when it's retrograding, it's oftentimes very slow to show you, you know, the benefic quality of it. So that's very important. And I just thought it's really interesting. This is the red planet. I mean, this is, you know, a picture of Mars, you know, from NASA. And then this is a picture of San Francisco on September 10th, as we've all been seeing in the news. And it's kind of so bizarre. It's kind of like, you know, you could take the colors either way, but it's like Mars descended on the Earth, you know? I mean, that was like the first thing that came to my mind when I saw all this. And so one of the things I think that's most important, and Mars, which is also known as Kuja, Mangala, Bhuma, Angara, I mean, there's so many words for it, is that because of what Mars represents in the chart and astrologically, at a great extreme, Mars periods accentuate impulsivity, hostility, aggression, ambition, assertion, war, meteorological extremes. I mean, if you looked at all the Mars periods, you will see that a lot of these things happen. It doesn't, I know what I'm writing sounds absolutely awful, you know, like Armageddon, but it really simply means that you've just got to be aware. I mean, Mars energy is at its, everybody is on edge, and that Mars is making it worse. And a lot of these, you know, a lot of these plant fires and everything else that's going on. But it's most important to know that the Mars energy is also telling you to sort of calm down. It's telling you to take some deep breaths. It's telling you not to, you know, worry so much, but it's also saying, you know, that there are, you know, people around you. I mean, you might drive on the highway and really do great, but somebody behind you, you know, might be going at a really fast speed and, you know, might rear end you or something. So it's super, super important during these Mars times to just keep your eye on everybody else, because you can't always control what other people do. The only things you can do is control yourself, you know, and those kind of things. And Mars obviously rules heat. So very literally, it's not a surprise that we've had fires. And also because Mars is in Aries. Mars is in Aries and Pisces. Some people are also talking about the fact that we have Mars at what we call Gandanta degrees. And the Gandanta degrees are really the last 3 degrees or 2 or 3 degrees of the water signs and the first 3 of the fire signs. So because it is now, you know, Mars is going from Pisces to Aries, the times when it is at that Gandanta degree, between like 28 Pisces and 2 Aries, was about August 11th through August 29th. And then it retrogrades about September 23rd to October 10th, which it could be, that could be a very, you know, difficult time, because that's when it's retrograding through those Gandanta degrees. And other things, Saturn will go direct, the nodes change signs. And then between December 19th and January 1st. Those are the 3 times when Mars is going to be in between 28 Pisces and 2 degrees of Aries. Now, right now, Mars is in Aries, it's fire. When it goes into water, into Pisces, yeah, there could be, you know, more flooding or hurricanes. I mean, because of the heat of the water, we don't know what it's going to bring. We just know that Mars is in the air, and that's, I think, really the most important thing. On a really personal level, and not just on a level of fires and volcanoes and all that kind of stuff, I think that acting compassionately, diplomatically, have to be tested. I had my own experience years ago when Mars was transiting the sun in my chart, retrograde 3 times. I lost a job because during this Mars period, I saw that Mars was going to go over my sun 3 times. And I thought to myself, okay, I got to like really, you know, calm myself down, breathe deeply. And of course, in a sort of Martian moment, because Mars is kind of impulsive and just acts like that, my boss said something to me that rubbed me the wrong way. And I kind of spoke back to her really nastily, and I knew that it was the end. The minute I spoke like that, I knew I had lost that job. So these are the kind of things that you really have to watch, no matter where it is in your chart. But where it is in your chart is especially going to remind you about that area. So your patience will be tested. You may be confronted, like I said, with situations where your mouth moves faster, than your mind or your heart. And you have to develop patience, listening skills, and control over what you say. And I think this is the lesson. The lesson is patience on a level, that goes beyond like these great fires and the pandemic, on a very personal note, that you live your life every day. This is the most important thing. Moving slowly, breathing deeply, doing your meditation, doing your sadhana. It is really important. And not responding to other people, because a lot of people are going to have very short tempers. And this is always on a Mars retrograde. This is not just because of the pandemic, but of course that makes it worse. And again, these are the Pisces and Aries. When you have Mars going through two signs, it means that Mars is going to be going through those two signs like in a period of 8 months. So that's going to be only in one part of the zodiac. That's why it's so intense. If Mars was going just through one sign, like it did a couple of years ago, it was in Capricorn only, that was for about 6 months. So so it does straddle Pisces and it straddles Aries, between June 18th and February 21st, 2021. So, you've already had, the Mars in Pisces. It entered Aries on August 16th. That is right before we had Kenosha. And that was also in that month, we had the Lebanon blast. I mean, it's just been like really a lot of things after another. And here it's going to station back. It's going to retrograde today, on the 9th, and then it's going to go back into Pisces on the 4th. That's why those dates of Gandanta I was telling you are going to be kind of tense. And then it goes direct on November 14th. But what it means is that an average transit that lasts like a couple days, is going to last a very, very long time. It lasts like 3 or 4 months. And these are just a couple of things. Again, I can easily, this will be on this YouTube, these handouts, and I can even email to you if you want them. You can always email me back. But this is when Mars entered what we call the shadow or the retrograde arc in kind of Western astrology. But this is when it went into the degree of 21 Pisces, where it's going to eventually go direct. So it's already, that's why I say that after 21 Pisces through 4 Aries, that span is the important span. So Mars went already on July 25th into the area of the zodiac where it's going to be retrograding back and forth. And I found this, I thought it was really funny that on July 30th, NASA successfully launches its Mars 2020 rover mission to search for signs of ancient life. So I thought, well, that's kind of perfect. And the other thing that is very important that I work with a lot that I want you to take note of, if I kind of give you anything that maybe you're not aware of, is that, like I said, midway through those cycles, you have the opposition of the sun with Mars. And that is also a very sensitive degree. So here we're going to have the fact that on October 13th, midway through the retrograde cycle, which is between September 9th and November 14th, we have the sun and Mars opposite each other. And that's going to be at 27 Virgo and 27 Pisces. The sun will be 27 Virgo and Mars will be 27 Pisces. So this is a hot degree because it's when Mars is closest to the Earth. Because in that cycle, it goes, it's crossing, coming close to the Earth. And with Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, whenever you have the opposition, the planet is retrograde and it's close to the Earth. So again, this is a very important degree. So whenever I look at the degrees and where they are, I always look and see that, Mars first conjoined that degree, that 27 degree on August 7th. And then we had the Lebanon explosion on the 4th, an India plane crash on the 7th, and Belarus started. There were a lot of protests in Belarus because of the leader of the country. And then we had Mars and Saturn in what in the West is considered a square, but we can look at it as kind of kendras to each other. So over here we had August 24th, and we had Blake shot in Kenosha August 23rd, and then protesters killed August 25th. All of these are degrees and dates when things are heating up. And then of course we have the retrograde where the fires accelerated on the West Coast. So again, this is what's going to happen. And then just very, very briefly, this is, again, I can send anybody these handouts. I've been watching this over the years because I do, year ahead talks. And so I'm always looking at what happens. So the fires are going to go into my database of what happened on this retrograde. But let's say the one in 2003, Mars was closest to the Earth in 60,000 years. If you went to the newsstands in 2003, and I remember this very clearly, Mars was pictured on the cover of, Sky, one of those magazines, I forget the name, Sky and Earth magazine, and it was saying, if this is closest to the Earth than it's been in years. And that summer, there was a heat wave in Europe. People died because it was so hot. And on the East Coast, there was a blackout all up and down the East Coast. And that happened August 14th. And also another really, remember, every 15 years, actually, Mars is going to be around the same part of the zodiac. So here we had Mars, October 1st, retrograding 2005. It was 29 Aries. And here it goes direct December 10th in Aries. So this was all in Aries. And that was when we had Hurricane Katrina. We had Katrina prior to the retrograde, but after it already entered what we call the arc. And what we see here, as I'm talking about that degree, is that Sun-Mars opposition degree was at 21 Libra, and the Sun was at 21 Libra, and Mars was at 21 Aries, 10 minutes. And the Mars was at 20 to 22 Aries, exactly conjunct this opposition degree when Katrina hit. And that year we had the Kashmiri earthquake and we had Hurricane Wilma. It was a horrible, horrible year of hurricanes. So anyway, I've been just watching a lot of events. And the last Mars retrograde we had was 2018. And that was when we had that volcano, lava, again, hot, heat, everything kind of, pouring out, so Martian. And that was during this time as well. So anyway, the real key, again, I'd love to hear your stories too. But the real key here is, again, to just be prepared for conflicts, problem solving, decision making, disruptions. Think before you act. And if you have your Lagna or your, Chandra Lagna at these signs, then these are where Mars is going to be, those houses. And those areas of the chart, you want to make sure and look at just to see how to be patient. If there are disruptions, then it means to just, be patient, because things might start to panic.
Yogi Carve, it's 3 a.m. there, isn't it?
Me. Somebody has to, let me just finish. And then Aries is in, Mars is in the 12th and 1st house. If you have Aries Lagna, Mars in 11 and 12. If you have Taurus, Mars in 10 and 11 Gemini, and so on. Mars 9 and 10 Cancer, Mars 8 and 9 Leo, Mars 7 and 8 Virgo, Mars 6 and 7 Libra, Mars 5 and 6 Scorpio, and Mars 4 and 5 Sag, Mars 3 and 4 in Capricorn, Mars 2 and 3 in Aquarius, Mars 1 and 2 in Pisces. And that's kind of important because no matter, even if you don't have a planet that's within those degrees of the retrograde, those are the areas that it's going to be. And this is just my last slide, because it's, again, we want to open this up. This is not just me talking, because like I said, I can go on for 2 hours more. But I actually put the outer planets in just for some people who I know might be Western astrologers who are looking at the YouTube. So this was when it was exact EDT, 6:22 p.m. in Washington. just so you get an idea of the fact that it was here at 4 degrees of Aries, the Mars. And Jupiter is over here in Sagittarius, still retrograde, but basically direct, because it's going direct tomorrow. So Jupiter will continue to be at this degree. Again, I do north. So again, here's the Mars in Aries. It's the third house if you do it for Washington, D.C. It'll be at any house wherever you go. If you do this chart, though, from the position of the moon, because that will be good for any time zone, you do get Mars actually 12th, from that moon. So when you're looking at that, that might be, something else, to keep in mind, let's say. And then the Saturn is retrograde, Mars is going to go retrograde, Jupiter's retrograde. So oftentimes, if you're going to look at the chart of the retrograde, you get also an idea of where the planets are in relationship to each other. So that's why I was saying that when Mars and Saturn were at that particular, degree, back in, let's say Mars was squaring Saturn August 24th. And again, that was just around the time of Kenosha. So, so even though, from the Vedic point of view, Mars, this is a 10th house aspect to Mars. The 10th house is still what we call a 25% aspect. And then Saturn would be throwing a 4 house or sign aspect, which would be a 75% aspect. So even though it is not 100%, with the Mars being 4 and 8 and Saturn being 3 and 10, these are still in Kendra to each other. And for me, that works very, very strongly. I know in the West that's considered a square, so they do work, quite strongly. Yeah, that's my, those are the things that I'm throwing out to you. So, again, as I said, I had a really interesting experience years ago with that Mars retrograde that I kind of keep in mind, in terms of being able to be very, cautious about what I say to people and how I treat other people, especially if you have Aries in your chart, or you have a strong Mars, that's going to obviously, exacerbate it, and things like that. So, so anyway, I hope that you guys can do some interacting, because I know that's what this was supposed to be about, right?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Well, years ago, I was doing Western astrology back in the 70s, and I was in medical school. And of course, I did as many charts as I could. And that's when I discovered that long stretch of Mars retrograde, when you have a bunch of people about the same age, and a bunch of them have Mars stationary and retrograde all in the same signs. Needless to say, it can make challenges for them to get along together. So I recommend looking at these Mars retrogrades for anyone who's in education, particularly with children and teenagers.
That's interesting. Well, you're always going to find that, I think, with any grade, because whenever you have a grade, at least the planets, well, at least Jupiter and Saturn and the nodes are always going to be in the same sign for most of those kids, except it might change during that year, 9 months. But then, of course, because the Mars retrograde is a period of it can be 6 months that it goes in the same sign, you are going to obviously get kids born in Mars retrograde that have more opportunity to share the same sign, and sure, definitely, it makes a lot of sense, so. Anybody want to share some Mars retrograde experiences or anything like that? What are the retrogrades? I mean, right? Because that's why I was hoping that other people would kind of come in and do some talking. Scott, you usually have something to say.
Yeah, I gave a present. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I gave a presentation on Mars retrograde on Thursday to a bunch of Iranian astrologers. So
okay,
I'm kind of talked out on the subject, but I will say it's fun to see the asteroids that are traveling with Mars. There's a handful of asteroids that are traveling alongside Mars right now. One of them is asteroid Shapiro. And Shapiro was the doctor who proved that Tourette syndrome was a neurological rather than a psychological condition. And I am quoting the work of Martha Lang Westcott here. So I think it's so interesting that election day is kind of in the middle of this Mars retrograde season. And I can just picture us all shouting obscenities at each other, you know, with asteroid Shapiro in the company of Mars. So, but we'll have to wait and see. So if
I think election day, I mean, election day was always going to be, I mean,
fraught,
no, well, but it was always going to be a bit strange, again, because
Yeah.
of the retrogrades, because on election day in America, Mercury is going to station. So that means Mercury is going to
Right.
change from a retrograde Mercury to a stationary Mercury on election day. And, you know, normally, you know, one would think, oh, well, it's going direct, so, you know, it's not going to create havoc. But a lot of us are aware of what happened when in 2000 on election day, when Bush v. Gore happened. And on that day, Mercury was doing the same thing. Mercury was changing course and moving direct. So when I saw that this year, I thought, oh, will there be another repeat, you know, of Bush v. Gore,
hanging Chad.
where we
Right.
won't have, well, mostly that we won't have the results on that day. And this was last summer, because I was writing an article about Mars and Venus retrograde in an annual for the year. And, you know, when I saw it, I thought, wow. And the added factor this year is the Mars retrograde. So that's the added factor, which means it's going direct November 14th. But I don't, people tend to think, oh, well, that's when we're going to get the results. But I'm not really sure that that's going to be the time when we're going to get results. But what is going to happen, I believe, because Mars is retrograde and it's going to be sitting, you know, on that 14 degree, you know, Mars is going to station direct on November 14th. But it is going to sit on that same degree for at least a week or so, because, you know, maybe more. So in fact, you know, on election day, which is, you know, which is November 3rd, Mars is already at 21 Pisces. So the thing is that on election day, Mars is at that degree where it is, you know, sort of sitting still. So even though it's going to station direct, just like Mercury is stationing direct, it's sitting still. And as I was saying, you know, when it's retrograde, it's very close to your door. When it's direct, it's moved a little bit beyond, you know, your front door, but it's still in one position. It's still, it's like fixed, you know, it's really sitting there in one position, very, very, very fixed. You know, and because of that, you know, I'm not necessarily sure that just because it goes direct, we're going to have results, because here, once again, we have Mars, you know, conjoining the opposition degree, which again, I think is a hot degree. And then it leaves that whole bunch of, you know, that whole area of the chart where it first went retrograde over here. And that's not until January. And then again, it's still going to be in Aries, and then it's not going to enter Taurus until February 21st. I don't think that's going to happen, because January 20th, they have to, by constitutional law, they have to inaugurate a president. You know, but it's a very interesting sort of thing, because like I said, we have those Gandanta, you know, degrees and those Gandanta dates. And that's not going to be exactly on election day, or even when Mars goes direct. And I think that the interesting thing, of course, is that Gandanta is going to be the final one between December 19th and January 1st. And if we remember from 2000, for those of us who were very much around then and paying attention, the actual election when Al Gore finally, you know, sort of conceded, thank you for that word, was mid-December. So again, mid-December is sort of goes along, you know, in a lot of ways, with this mid-December date, when it's conjoining that opposition degree, and then it leaves, what we call this arc, January 2nd. It's a very difficult time the next few months, for many other reasons too, that have to do with the nodes and the eclipses, and they're going to be in the chart of Trump, and and I always feel he represents America. I mean, I am looking at Mars retrograde as bringing in things that are, like more violence again, more meteorological things. I mean, I think these fires are going to make way for other things. It doesn't mean it's all going to be in America. You can have floods and earthquakes, because remember 2005, when I was talking about Katrina, we had that earthquake in Kashmir, that huge earthquake in Kashmir, in October 8th. And then we had a horrible hurricane in Florida, which, in October.
Which one? There are so many.
No, Wilma. That was Hurricane Wilma. That was right near Katrina.
Wilma was not nice. Yes, lost a window. Yeah.
This was, you're right, this was after Katrina and after this earthquake. So I think the thing that's important, and that was also in the same part of the zodiac. It was also in Aries. So I think that that's kind of important to see that after, that you had hurricanes and earthquakes then. Maybe there were fires then too, but I mean, that was really one of the more, big things. We had the Haiti earthquake during a Mars retrograde. I mean, a lot of things happen, during retrogrades, not just Mars. Like I said, in 2018, we had the lava, the volcano from Hawaii.
I didn't realize the Malaysian plane disappeared. By the way, there was a really interesting question from Sandy. Did you see that on Mars retrograde on the markets? Chat here. Do you want me to read it to you?
Sure.
Do you have any view on the impact of Mars retrograde on stock markets? Is it viewed as positive? And I know nothing about this.
It's wonky.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into markets. That's a whole other issue. If I knew about that, trust me, I'd be retired and living on some nice island if I could follow, if I knew what I was doing with markets, but I don't.
Oh my God, me too. And I would come visit. Listen, let me ask you this. In the West, there is a tradition that people with Mars retrograde sometimes have a problem expressing anger or being direct. They tend to be a little more passive aggressive. I don't know how far back this tradition goes in the 20th century. Is there anything similar? Is there a similar tradition in Jyotish?
Well, I don't know if that's really the tradition in Western astrology either, except that psychologically over the years, people have said if you're born with retrogrades, it means that you're, introverted or fearful or things like that.
Right.
And very frankly, because retrogrades are strong, I don't agree. I tend to really look at retrogrades as the word that it represents, vakra, which means, well, crooked, your own path. It means that you think differently. It means that you express that planet differently. I mean, I know I've met people, for instance, with Mercury retrograde, and they have been a few people I know in Mercury retrograde who are amazing with languages. They can switch their mind. They can switch to languages because they're using their ability to communicate in a very in a different way than, let's say, other people will use in terms of studying a language, really kind of very methodically. They can just do it like intuitively. It's like more of an intuitive sort of Mercury. Mm-hmm. And I just find that retrogrades work differently than you expect them to work. But this whole idea of, the retrograde being, sort of, inner or this and that. I mean, Michael Jordan has Mars retrograde. So,
right. No, I agree with you, but I call it symbol migration because it captures the popular imagination. Exactly. I mean,
so I think that's kind of how it works in the natal chart a lot.
Okay. I have a theory about how, this business, because when you look back in the Shastras and the passages where retrograde is discussed as a concept, it's in Chestabala, right next to it. It's with strength, and it's just compared to the strength of the moon related to being the bright moon. In other words, retrograde is strong and it's right. and it's kind of exaggerated.
Mhm.
But here's my personal pet theory of how this came out different in the Western astrology of the 20th century.
Mhm.
And I think it has to do with the cultural bias that we have about time as Westerners. This whole thing of progress, okay? It's everything has to be continuous quality improvement. If you've ever been in the healthcare industry or ever moving forward, you know, in our famous Protestant hymns. And so if it's not moving forward, then something's off in the Western mindset of time. So
Well, I think,
I
in
wonder-
my own opinion is that in India, astrology or Jyotish is an unbroken tradition. It's been used steadily. It's never broken. It's never not been used.
Mhm.
So everything that has come from the Shastras, from the scriptures, and then of course with added scriptures because people were writing more and adding things to it, especially when it came to Tajika. The thing is that whatever you're getting now, I mean, of course, we from the, you know, I'm Western, so I might have a little bit of a different spin than, let's say, Vinay Aditya or Dr. Charak, but everybody is so exposed to a global mentality, and we're taking things and we're seeing how they work in modern times. You have to take what's in the scriptures and redefine it a little bit. But the problem with Western astrology with many of these concepts is a lot of the traditional techniques were lost. So when you had modern astrology come in, which kind of was like Alan Leo, and you started having it, they created new meanings for things that I'm not saying they're not relevant. I'm just saying that they have very little to do with how those things were viewed originally. You know, so I think that was really why some of the Western take on certain concepts kind of doesn't particularly, you know, agree with some of the traditional ones, you know, like with Chestabala and things. And that's why I said that retrogrades are strong, you know, and that's why, but not auspicious necessarily. That's the difference, you know. They're strong, they're powerful, you know, you have to pay attention to them.
I like the distinctions.
Mhm.
So yeah.
So I think that's kind of very, very important, you know. Is there anybody else that has, I don't know who else is here.
Yeah,
Ronnie?
Ronnie, there is a question in the chat coming from the Sandeep Nima saying that do we have any view on the impact of Mars and the RX, I think Rahu, on the stock market? It's viewed as a positive or not?
I'm going to be very honest with you is that I'm not a financial astrologer. I look at retrogrades like in this period, and all I can say is I think it's unpredictable. Mars and Rahu, I don't know. I mean, they're not, you know, right now Mars just came out of a conjunction with Ketu. So Mars is not going to be, you know, necessarily conjoining Rahu until next year. And I don't know if it's not on a retrograde, then the Mars Rahu conjunction happens quickly. You know what I mean? If it's retrograde, it happens, you know, over time. But if it's happening on a direct Mars, you know, it'll happen very quickly. I'm happy to hear your perspectives. Who is it, Sandeep? But, you know, to be very honest, I'm not a financial astrologer. And I mean, I have my own ideas of, let's say, Jupiter in the market, but I kind of keep away. I don't advise my clients about investing in stocks or anything like that, because I really feel to do that, you better know what you're talking about, you know, because money is very sensitive. And I would never want to tell my client to invest in something and then find out a week later that the stock dropped, you know. I mean, I would not want to be responsible for that. So, yeah, so I can't really answer. Financial astrology is not my specialty. I mean, I can look at your chart individually and see if it's a good time for you to invest, but to tell you what to invest in, you know, I mean, I'm fairly good with real estate, but, you know, not in terms of looking at the trends. But I don't know what to expect from now till the end of the year. As you see, we have so many crazy aspects right now with this Mars that I would just say that it's just going to be, you know, if you want to invest, I mean, maybe intuitively, you know what to invest in. You know, people have certain ideas. about products related, commodities that are related to, let's say, Aries and Pisces. But I wish I could help, but I'm not really good about that.
Ronnie, there is a question on YouTube. We have obviously talked a lot about the election and how these retrogrades and all that will work, but there was a little bit more specific question as to how does this impact Trump's chart?
Again, how does it affect Trump's chart? Well, I think Trump has other aspects besides Mars, let's say. But, and again, I'm not predicting anything with the election either. I just don't, because I don't want to really get into politics particularly. But, I can easily look at Trump's chart and tell you, we can see where Mars is, in relation to Trump's chart. But I'm just gonna, I'll call it up and we can look at that. I do north. So, this is kind of, I don't know if you do south, I do north. So let's see if I can do it this way. I know what I can do. I'll do it this way. I'll call up the chart and I'll put it in South Indian. Here is, let's see, sorry about that. I didn't particularly want to get into that, but we can just look at where the houses are and stuff like that. It's fine. So that's South Indian. And then I'll just do that as a blank. I'll do that as a blank. This is Prasher's Life, by the way. I guess that's a plug. Just so I can make it a little bigger. And this will be on YouTube then if people want to listen after. So basically, it just means that if you're looking at Trump's chart, Mars is
I think we cannot see the chart, right?
You can't see the chart?
No.
No? Oh, I know why. I'm sharing. I have to share my screen and go into Prasher's Life. New share. That's why. Okay. Now you can see it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I have to always know how to do it with Zoom and figure that one out. So, so Mars, like today, is 4 degrees of Aries. So right now it's in his 9th house, right? It's going through his 9th house of Aries. And as I said, and then it's going to go through his 8th house of Pisces. Again, that's just Mars. I mean, he's got a lot of other stuff going on in his chart, like, a lot of us do. But if you're looking at that, aspect, in particular, that's kind of like what you would look at. And then you could see that at some point he will have Mars opposite his Jupiter from Pisces over here, and things like that. And the point really is that he will have Mars going there at the 21 degree Pisces. And then as the November goes on after the election, Mars will be opposite his Jupiter. You can take what you want from that. I'm not going to make a prediction now or anything because there's a lot of stuff going on in his chart that go beyond Mars. But for him, I would say definitely, like everybody else, watch what you say, watch what you do, because you can arouse anger, which we know. But, the other thing is that I look at the president's chart as the chart of the nation. And when we had, because that is what they did in ancient times, they looked at the king as the nation. When we had the total eclipse of the sun in August 2017, the summer 2017, August 17th, the eclipse was exactly on his ascendant. And it was really right over here, that eclipse. And obviously it was conjoining his Mars. And I remember everybody was going a little bit crazy. Oh, what's going to happen with Trump? What's going to happen with Trump? And I said, I thought to myself, I said, it doesn't have to be Trump. It could just be the nation, that eclipse and some of those aspects. And very soon after that eclipse, what happened? We had the flooding in Houston, and hurricanes and flooding, and then in Florida and Puerto Rico. That all happened very, very shortly after that eclipse. So to me, a lot of this does have to do with the nation. But I think when it goes into Pisces, it's in his 8th house. You can also look at it as when it's in Aries, it's 6th from the moon. So if he was my client, I would definitely tell him to watch his health. I would definitely say when Mars goes through the 8th house, you know, to be very careful, because Mars does have to do with inflammation in general, you know. And I think that because it's opposite Jupiter, which rules the 8th, you know, maybe that's what I would say to him. But I think that's all I'm going to say. Trump's chart. He's got other things that are interesting. He's got Rahu going right into his 4th and 10th houses. And as I said on my notes lecture the other week, I'm going to talk more about his chart on the Raj Yoga lecture that I'm giving, because I'm going to talk about yogas that have to do with greatness and status, which are Raja Yogas. And why some people's Raja Yogas really work out and why some don't. So I will be using this chart for that. But I'm happy to hear what you think, you know, as well. So that's my Trump story. Are there any? I can't see the chat, so you know what's in the chat. If there are any questions in the chat. And I think we're moving on to 10:30 anyway. But
Yeah.
Are there any other questions in the chat? Or does anybody want to say anything?
There, not in the chat over here, but there are questions in the chat of you.
I don't know whether it's a question, but there is a comment from Hey Jude. Moon, Mars, Uranus are going to be conjunct during the swearing in of the new president.
I'm not even looking that far. I am not looking at that inauguration chart, but yes, Mars and Uranus, for those of you who use Uranus, are exactly conjunct. They're exactly conjunct on the inauguration chart, which, yeah, may not look so great, but you know, I mean, I think that if you're as old as I am and you've been doing astrology as long as I have, every time we have a new president, people are predicting doom and gloom from that inauguration chart. I think I've always seen bad things predicted for every president, you know. But no, it's not a great chart, but you know, it could also be the weather. I mean, maybe we'll have a snowstorm on January 20th and something will prevent the inauguration from taking place outside. I mean, it can be as simple as that, you know. So you never know what might happen. Maybe you'll have an electrical blackout, you know, an electrical, you know, short circuit or something like that.
Yeah. Can you easily see what dasha Trump is in? Somebody asked on YouTube. I
Yeah,
could pull it up.
sure. I mean, this is again, as I tell people all the time, I use Krishnamurti Ayanamsha. So the Ayanamsha that I use is going to be 5 weeks earlier. It's going to start 5 weeks earlier, you know, than Lahiri. So he is in a Jupiter Mahadasha, and he is now in Jupiter Saturn. He's in Jupiter Saturn even with Lahiri. Around election day, he would be, again with my Ayanamsha, he would be in Jupiter Saturn Rahu, but he would be in Jupiter Saturn Rahu in Lahiri as well, because that means that Jupiter Saturn Rahu in Lahiri would start about 5 weeks later. So that means it would start like 3rd week in October. So yeah. He's in Jupiter Saturn Rahu, and then he would go into Jupiter Mercury June 1st, 2021. Okay. So that's his dasha.
All right.
So okay. Shouldn't have all these people up here. Some of my clients. Anything else that we can? Since it's getting late.
Is this? Yeah, I think we pretty much closer to this closing the session. But at the same time, we would like to just ask if somebody has any further question on this one. So, any further question from people? I see 1 or 2 people unmuted themselves. So if not, I mean, it was a beautiful session, Ronnie, I can definitely say that. It's like, you know, I was so much into just listening to the whole, you know, planet, the way you were walking through, as if it's one of the looking into instead of just having the chat. So it was undoubtedly really beautiful. There are many people watching on the YouTube, so they are definitely enjoying and interacting from there.
And I'm sure people will come later on. I know that I sent to my mailing list and people said, oh, I can't come. I said, don't worry, it's on YouTube. It'll always be on YouTube now.
Exactly. Same here. I was also giving the same message that no worries. You can go back and watch the same thing whenever you like to, especially when we send the communication. The time they get it, it takes a while. So I think we are good. So there are, obviously the comments coming in terms of, thank you, Ronnie. Enjoyed hearing your views on the Mars retrograde. From the Swati is coming. Thank you for explaining how the Mars retrograde is more intense than the other transits. So, I have not done my analysis on the retrograde part. So it was really interesting to hear from you, and especially looking into the events which you talked about was really fascinating for me.
Thank you. Also, I want to say that for those of you, if you look in Brihad Samhita by Paramahira, he talks a lot about the transits, and he does have a chapter 6 in that book on Mars retrograde. It's a little bit hard to understand though, because he does talk a lot about some of the nakshatras, but also from the timing from, like, if you have the 16th nakshatra from the time that Mars was on an eclipse, it's a little complicated. The astronomers, the traditional ancient astronomers were far more complicated than people realize. Some of I can't even follow a lot of their direction, but it is in that text, some more stuff about that, about the retrogrades. You don't find it though in the natal text. They really won't talk about it, So that's kind of what it was.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you for that reference. Yeah, so with that, I think we will not take a lot of time. We would definitely like to, go more towards concluding the session, especially again tomorrow morning. We will be here with our next, 3 webinars, which is happening one after another. So I'm not sure, Ronnie, are you able to join the sessions or not? But you are definitely on demand. It's there. So we try our level best to upload all of it on the same day,
right,
so that people can catch up if they like on the weekend part. So with that, Rani ji, I will definitely request you to let's go towards. Yeah, Ronnie, do you like to have any concluding points which you like to say to the people on the YouTube watching?
Yeah, you know what I would like to say that I should have said in the beginning, that really all our prayers are with all the people who are affected by the fires. I mean, this is really, California, Oregon, Washington, and let's hope it gets contained. And yeah, I would just say for Mars to just do some mantras and prayers in your daily life, and again, take those breaths, meditate, really try to remember, not to react to everybody else around you if they, tend to want to debate, again, the political debates, I'm trying to avoid them, especially during this time. So unless you really like fighting.
So very interesting, Ronnie. It was really nice, and all those beautiful comments I'm seeing on the right side is thank you very much. Thank you. The presentation was very informative. So with all the beautiful comment, thank you for your time to be able to take out from your such a busy schedule during the September and be there with us and having this, the whole preparation towards making the session so lively we are really appreciative of that.
Thank you.
So with that, I definitely would like Rani ji to be able to do the mantras, and we'll close the session.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ronnie ji. It was very interesting, extremely stunning to see how the events of the past several years have connected with Mars retrograde, something that I didn't see before, and it was very fascinating. Thank you so much for bringing that to us. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
good night.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody. Sleep
Yeah,
well.
bye. Good night.
Thank you, Meenakshi, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank
Good night,
you.
Ronnie. Thanks.
Good night. See you. Good night. Hi, Jitendra.
Thank you very much. Very nice to listen about the
You
Mars.
too. I have so many nice photos from Arshavidya last year with
Yeah.
you and Camilla, and yeah, it was nice. And Gudrun.
I always remember. Yes. Next year we'll meet again.
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully.
And you too, Meenakshi. Have a good sleep.
You too. Thank you.
I hope you're
Thank you very much.
sleeping. I hope you're sleeping.
Oh, yeah, I am. A few days I am not.
Okay.
So sorry for a lot of emails on those days.
That's okay. That's fine. I just got confused about where to sign on, but that was fine. I'm glad
I-
you called me. Okay.
I know.
Great.
Tomorrow
Thanks.
there is a wonderful day. There are 6 planets in own positions from tomorrow.
Mm.
Yeah, so 3
Yeah.
days for the very good days.
Okay. Good. I hope so.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Take care.
you. Take care. Good night. Bye, Jitendra ji.
Bye. Ji. Bye.